Although diplomatic meetings involving heads of state often carry a certain level of drama, few encounters in modern times have erupted as publicly and controversially as the recent exchange in the Oval Office between US President Donald Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The intended purpose of their gathering was primarily to finalize an economic accord granting the United States access to Ukraine's valuable rare earth minerals. Observers expected formal statements about shared goals, followed by a press conference heralding stronger US-Ukrainian relations. Instead, they witnessed a high-stakes confrontation that left one leader departing in frustration and the other two appearing fed up. In the days leading up to Zelensky's trip, it was evident that tensions simmered on both sides. The Trump administration insisted that Ukraine was relying too heavily on foreign support and resisting diplomatic efforts to end the war with Russia. Trump himself had made statements suggesting that he saw no reason for the United States to continue funneling unlimited resources into a conflict where Washington had no direct territorial interest. Furthermore, Vice President Vance had been candid about his skepticism of extensive foreign aid, criticizing Zelensky for demanding more weapons while delivering what he deemed insufficient gratitude. From Kiev's perspective, Zelensky faced the unenviable task of convincing Washington not to reduce the military and financial lifelines that have helped Ukraine repel ongoing Russian aggression. Ukrainian officials hoped that the minerals deal would serve as an olive branch, an arrangement that delivered tangible returns for the United States while affirming a strategic partnership. In Zelensky's mind, demonstrating a genuine willingness to cooperate economically might offset any perceptions that Kyiv was simply a beneficiary of American largesse without contributing something in return. According to various accounts, the atmosphere in the Oval Office became fraught within minutes. When reporters were allowed inside for the initial remarks, President Trump spoke about his aim to bring about peace for both Russia and Ukraine. That phrase alone caused unease among some Ukrainian observers, who interpreted it as an attempt to position Moscow's grievances on the same moral footing as Kyiv's defense of its own territory. Zelensky politely contended that, from 2014 onward, Russia had repeatedly shown bad faith, annexing Crimea and then fueling separatist movements in eastern Ukraine. He referenced multiple ceasefire agreements that he claimed Russia had unilaterally breached. This defense did not sit well with Vice President Vance, who interjected to insist that diplomacy was the only path to peace. Zelensky countered that he had tried diplomacy, citing the Normandy format talks with Germany, France, and Russia, as well as bilateral arrangements that had yielded few concrete results. At one point, Zelensky asked, "What kind of diplomacy, JD, are you speaking about?" pointing to the many promises that had crumbled under Russian aggression. The back and forth escalated when Vance accused Zelensky of staging a propaganda tour in front of American media. The Ukrainian president bristled at the insinuation and emphasized the realities of war in his homeland, facts he believed Americans needed to hear if they were to understand why Ukraine would not make territorial concessions to an invading power. Soon, Trump threw himself into the debate with greater force, warning Zelensky that he was playing a dangerous game by refusing to compromise, as it could draw the United States deeper into potential conflict. Repeatedly, Trump indicated he wanted a swift end to the bloodshed, even if that meant pushing Ukraine to accept some form of peace deal that might be less than ideal for Kyiv. Zelensky's repeated emphasis on Russia's track record evidently infuriated both Trump and Vance, who felt the Ukrainian leader was not showing the deference expected of someone whose country received substantial assistance. The tone only worsened when the conversation veered into accusations that Zelensky had not properly thanked the US government. Vance suggested that Zelensky had even been campaigning for the opposition during a prior visit to an American ammunition plant, though the specific details of that claim remained unclear. The rancor reached a point where the White House press pool was promptly escorted out so the leaders could speak privately. What followed was a flurry of tense consultations among top American officials. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz tried to gauge whether the visit could be salvaged. Trump ultimately decided that Zelensky had not shown sufficient willingness to compromise or adequately recognize Washington's role in supporting Ukraine. Within roughly an hour, the Ukrainians were informed the meeting was over. The White House canceled the planned press conference, the signing ceremony for the minerals deal, and even a private lunch that had been arranged as part of the official schedule. Images of Zelensky walking out of the White House appeared on newscasts worldwide, showing a visibly frustrated leader stepping quickly into a vehicle as staff members hurried behind him. Trump later posted a blunt statement online, accusing the Ukrainian president of disrespect and proclaiming that Zelensky could return only when he is ready for peace. The meltdown ignited immediate debate across Washington. Some Republicans praised Trump for taking a firm stance, while Democrats called the confrontation an embarrassment and a betrayal of a key ally that had been invaded by a much larger power. Internationally, many European officials rallied to Zelensky's defense. They noted that Russia remains the aggressor in a war that has killed thousands and displaced millions of Ukrainians. They questioned the wisdom of applying moral equivalence to both parties when one side, Russia, had flouted international law by seizing territory. Conversely, Russian officials seized the opportunity to gloat, pointing to the rupture as evidence of diminishing American-Ukrainian solidarity. Zelensky, departing Washington with the minerals deal unsigned, used social media to thank the American people, Congress, and Trump for their past support. He reaffirmed Ukraine's commitment to a fair and lasting peace, implying that the conflict would not truly be resolved if Russia were granted free rein to carve away chunks of Ukrainian territory. Analysts remarked that Zelensky's refusal to cede territory reflected public sentiment at home, where any suggestion of giving land to Russia is viewed as a dangerous precedent that could invite further aggression later. Going forward, questions linger about the extent to which Trump's posture may translate into actual cuts in military assistance. While the administration wields substantial influence, congressional leaders could attempt to secure continued aid if they believe it necessary. Meanwhile, if American support genuinely ebbs, Ukraine might pivot more aggressively toward European partners, though they too can only supply a fraction of the resources Washington has been providing. This extraordinary Oval Office debacle reveals a deeper philosophical clash. Zelensky aims to preserve his nation's sovereignty, believing that incomplete or deceptive deals with Russia will only invite more invasion. Trump and Vance prioritize concluding the conflict swiftly, framing it in part as an issue of cost and risk for the United States. Their very public clash shows how two leaders, one fighting for national survival, the other focusing on global and domestic implications, can find themselves at odds. The session that was meant to symbolize unity instead ended with doors literally closing in Zelensky's face, showing just how precarious this partnership has become.